Howdy, folks, and welcome back to Healthy Humor. I'm your host, Doc MB, and with me today is Dr. Ashley Afaw. She is an occupational therapist. She works at the Oklahoma University School for Occupational Therapy.
We're in the College
Call
of
it?
Allied Health, and so it's the occupational therapy program within it. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we're going to learn a little bit more about occupational therapy today, and just some ins and outs of the profession, as well as some more information about what Dr. Afaw does, and hopefully you guys like it. So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'm sure they will.
Yes,
OT's great.
Yes.
So wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is a great opportunity. And I think we'll probably talk about it later, but just getting the word out there about what occupational therapy is, I think is really important, just based on the work that we get to do and, of course, how passionate I am about it.
Right. Absolutely. So, and with you have a kind of a different background than I think most people in this community, for sure. You grew up predominantly overseas
Yes.
and then came to Tulsa to pursue your education.
Yes.
At what point in there was it that you said, okay, occupational therapy, this is the road we're going?
Right. So it's an interesting journey. It was not OT had never been on my radar before. So I originally wanted to be a physical therapist. So my mom had had a lot of knee procedures and then knee replacements. And so I got to see physical therapy a lot through her rehabilitation and through those procedures. And so of course, I think most people who go into healthcare are looking at being in a helping field, right? And wanting to help others. And so I knew I wanted to do that. I'd seen physical therapy and I thought that's what I want to do. And so that had been my plan from the time I was in high school. And I'd also seen, I don't know if you've ever seen this movie. It's called Regarding Henry, and it has Harrison Ford in it. It's old. I am aging myself, but I saw it when I was probably a teen, and Harrison Ford, just to make it real quick, he ends up being shot, has a head injury, is going through therapy, and the therapist was a physical therapist.
Okay.
If you go back and watch the film, I'm pretty sure he was an OT. From some of the things that they were working on, I was like, this feels very OT. But I didn't know. And that movie really moved me. And just seeing my mom's process, I was like, okay, I'm going to go with PT. So I ended up coming to the University of Tulsa and getting my degree in exercise sports science, knowing I'm going to go to PT school.
Okay.
So worked really hard, graduated a semester early, and started applying to PT programs. So in that time, I was waiting. I had heard back from two universities and was accepted, and they were out of state. And I was waiting to hear back from OU to see if I got into the PT program. I ended up being waitlisted, and I thought, okay, I'll work for a year as a tech, then we'll move, and I'll go to PT school out of state. Well, then OU called and said, in reviewing your application, we think you'd be a good fit for OT. Would you like to join the OT program? And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. What is occupational therapy? So I ended up shadowing, and I was like, this could be good. I'm not sure, but let's do a year of school and see if I like it. If not, I still have a plan to go out of state. So once I started the OT program, I realized very quickly this was the career for me.
Okay.
And just ended up loving it.
I love that. I really enjoy listening to people talk about their passion and how they found it.
Sure.
Because you can, especially if it's genuine, you can really feel it, and I can feel it when you're saying it right now. So I'm loving this.
Yes, of course.
So what was it though? Because you had already had such a deep passion for physical therapy. So what happened in that year that
I think in that year, I saw how I could be really creative in my profession. And not to say you can't be creative in PT, that's not what I'm saying at all. But in OT, it just utilized the skills that I had in a way that I found meaningful. And being able to support people in what we call occupation, so those activities that you engage in, it can be anything. And that we can touch all of those different points and really be embedded in someone's life situation, the context that they're that contribute to that, and really support them in the things that they want and need to do. And for me, I was like, oh, this is like you get to do everything.
Yeah.
And I loved that. I loved that it wasn't just one thing, that we could just do so much. And I like being busy. I like changing things up regularly, and the profession really allows me to do that.
Okay. So within occupational therapy, um, it is similar to physical therapy in some ways, but what is it that, like, if someone needed a clear cut, this is the difference, or this is occupational therapy, this is how you could, if you saw someone engaging in occupational therapy, you'd be able to say, that's occupational therapy.
Right. I think that's probably why we have misconceptions,
Mhm.
because we can do so much. And so when I think about what makes OTOT, it really comes down to those occupations. We are looking at those activities that that individual or group or population wants to be engaged in
Mhm.
and participate in. And so we look at, well, how can we get you to do that? You know, if there is a barrier or a challenge that we need to help overcome, we can help you do that. And so we really want to encompass well-being and health, quality of life, right? And do that within that person's ability, what they would like. It's very individualized. And so it sounds very broad because it is. We can work with individuals at home, in the community, at schools, at their jobs. Wherever you go and whatever you do, we can be there to support. And so I think that's what sets us apart. And really having, you know, our background and being able to analyze tasks, look at people's routines and roles. um, what are those activities that they're engaged in? How do we overcome those challenges and be able to support them there, and make those things possible?
Absolutely. So on that spectrum of all those things that an
Mhm.
occupational therapist gets to do,
Sure.
you've done a lot of work in schools,
Yes.
in an academic setting, and obviously now you're in the upper level of that. But
Yes.
before you did stuff more, in, was it elementary school level or was it the full spectrum?
So I have worked in pediatrics for my whole career. Going from my first job was working at the Children's Hospital, doing outpatient, inpatient acute care in the NICU. And so I worked in those areas and then transitioned into school-based therapy and worked with kiddos from what we would say like preschool. So age 3 is when they can, if they have been identified by the school as qualifying for special education.
Okay.
They can start receiving school-based services. So we start from 3 through age 21 in the school setting. So I've really worked across childhood, essentially birth to 21.
Yeah. So in that school setting,
Yeah.
What what is it that would normally a teacher might see it and think they might need occupational? I mean, what is it that's kind of helping to identify? So, because we might have parents also listening who
Sure.
they never did this any teacher ever, but the teacher might not be seeing. They might be seeing this at home, so they could listen as well
For
to
sure.
or look for some of the signs.
So we're looking at sometimes, you know, teachers, they'll be identifying when there's a student who's maybe struggling and keeping up with coursework, or having a lot of times. I think our first initial referral is for handwriting, and seeing that, but that could be you know, a symptom of something bigger that might be going on.
Okay.
Or if there's a child who maybe has some sensory processing differences and is struggling in the classroom environment, navigating all the different ways we receive sensory information. And so that could look like inattention, or we might have some challenging behaviors that can occur.
Okay.
So that might be a reason why a teacher might be reach out to us to say, hey, would you mind coming and observing, maybe doing a screening and providing some support to help that child be successful in the school environment?
Okay. And within that, how much or how often is it that there is some larger problem or is it more often it's something smaller and Or is there no one's
It,
more prevalent than
you
the
know,
other?
it's like it's the it depends,
Okay.
a phrase that we love to use because it truly depends on that child and that child's needs. If there are underlying motor delays
Mhm.
that we need to be addressing, you know, doing task analysis, observation, gathering data so that we can see, okay, we initially saw it here, but is it occurring in other areas or with
Mhm.
other tasks that we need to be aware of and addressing? And so looking at it from that point of view, and I think for us, it's gathering all of that information. We want to talk to individuals that work with that child, that see that child daily, to gather that
Mhm.
information to see, okay, is this only happening at this one moment in the classroom, or are we seeing that happening when they go to their special classes like art or PE or music, when they're out on the playground? Are we seeing difficulties there in the lunchroom?
Mhm.
We just want to look at all the different areas that that child will access, what their expectations are, what the activities that they have to engage in to see, okay, are we seeing a pattern here that
Mhm.
we could help support and help this child be able to access their education better?
Okay. I know it might be different for different school systems, different states, everything. But when you're school based like that,
Yes.
and you have the, a 9 month schedule,
Mhm.
what's going on with those students over the summer? I
Right.
mean,
So we do, school districts do provide extended school year services.
okay.
So then they come in and they have curriculum set up over the summer that helps just kind of continue with a lot of the
Mhm.
skills that they've been working on, and then address any gaps that might still be there over the summer.
Okay. Amazing. Yeah. So you have this broad spectrum of things you get to do. A lot of it is kind of more, it's therapy through play a lot of times, or it can appear that
Yes,
way
it can
from
appear
the
that way
outside.
for sure.
So, whenever that's happening and it appears as though it's play on the outside, is that is the reason for using those kinds of modalities because it makes it more fun or because it makes real life more, or is there a real reason, or is it just because you guys can, so you do? I mean,
Right. I think, play falls under our
uh,
occupations, right? So when we think of occupations, we have our activities of daily living, which is like our bathing, dressing, grooming. We have instrumental activities of daily living, rest, and sleep, um, health management, and play falls under those occupations. And play can happen across the lifespan, right? But we primarily think about it in childhood because play is just uh, like a key occupation during that time of life, right? That's how they're learning. They're trying new things. It's fun. It's meaningful, right? It's intrinsically motivating for
right.
them to play, and so we can use that. When we're working with kiddos, we get a lot more buy-in when
Hmm.
they also want to
Okay.
engage and do that, right? And play's a great way to do it. So you might see me playing Candyland.
Hmm.
But when I'm using it, I'm looking at, okay, how are we doing with turn taking, following rules, sequencing steps for an
Hmm.
activity? How are we able to pick up the cards and manipulate the cards to move our pieces, to count, to recognize colors, to engage in communication with someone
Hmm.
else, and that social participation piece of it? So it's so much more than just playing, right?
Right.
We're able to break that task down into all these different pieces and to see how the child is able to do those things and work.
It's really interesting hearing that description just because you're identifying way more than a physical aspect to it. You're identifying that social and that cognitive aspect. And I think that is where some people might, that's where they kind of get lost in it.
Right.
It's easy to understand how how physical therapy, you do these exercises and it heals this bone, this ligament, this joint,
Yes.
this whatever was injured most likely.
Right.
Um, but with occupational therapy, you're doing a lot of you can't just see it,
Right. Right.
especially if you're not fully trained to see it, or it
Exactly.
might be the kind of thing where you look at it and you're like, this seems just a little different, like the way they're manipulating the cards or they're processing when it comes to maybe not the turn, but they drew the card and have to think about it, or those kinds of things. You're doing all of it. So
All of it. We're looking at all of it. And it's something you make up a great point about home exercise programs like with PT and doing these exercises, and they have a lot of protocols after certain surgeries of things to do to help someone recover from that. um, when we're looking at OT, we don't in general don't have a lot of protocols,
mhm,
right? Or procedures that we follow to get to an end point. And so we are looking at all of these details of an activity,
mhm,
and finding how can I use this activity to meet this area that I need to support this individual in. So that could be the cognitive skills. It
mhm,
could be a physical aspect. Maybe it's emotional,
mhm,
right? Communication, those kinds of things. And so it really pulls it all together, and we can really, honestly, I tell students all the time, they don't always believe me in the beginning. And I say, this comes with practice, this comes with time, but I could walk into any space and be like, okay, what do we have? I'll find a way to use it.
okay.
And that's kind of how, obviously, over time, it takes time to get into that kind of mindset or adaptability. You have to develop it, but it's truly, we can use anything
Right.
and make it
Kind
happen.
of MacGyvering
Yeah,
therapy.
very
Right.
much so.
I
It's
love that.
fabulous.
So you can walk into any room and find something to use within your
Mhm.
therapy. Um, what about any setting? I mean, we've talked about school-based, clinical, well, pediatric at a hospital. Just keeping the terms
Sure.
down. Where else? Where else am I gonna go find my occupational
I
therapist?
mean, literally anywhere people are is
Okay.
where OTs can be.
Mhm,
So, obviously, we think of traditional settings like the hospital or an
mhm,
outpatient clinic, schools. Early intervention is
mhm.
also one that's probably more commonly known, but OT is really expanding into non traditional spaces.
Okay.
So, using community partners, looking at nonprofit organizations, those types of
Mhm,
areas where we can provide our expertise and support. And so I've known therapists who have worked with women who have been formerly incarcerated and working back into regaining those roles of mom, employee,
right.
those kinds of things. And so supporting them in that
Mhm,
and what that looks like. I think there's just so many different avenues that we can help support. So when we're thinking not only about activities, but what are someone's roles? What are their routines that they need
mhm,
to be engaged in? And so we're really looking at individuals who may or may not have a disability, but might
mhm,
need support in life to help achieve that health and wellness and quality of life that they're
mhm,
needing. And so at the university with our students, we partner a lot with different organizations in the
mhm,
community. And so we're able to send our students out there for different experiences and to help support programming. So one that I think of is the center.
mhm.
We've utilized a lot, and like they do so much, right? And so
Right.
OT embeds really well into helping support their programming and the individuals that they serve in our community.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
Do you feel like I feel this way, so I'd like to know if you do,
Mhm.
as an occupational
Sure.
therapist, that over the last, because I think I first heard about occupational therapy maybe 10 years ago.
Okay.
And certainly in that time, I think that the awareness has grown. But would you agree with that? Do you think that there's less now of well, this is what occupational therapy is, and that having to kind of explain it before you get to then either engage in therapy or just move on with the conversation? How much of the
I think there has been some
Mhm.
growth.
Okay.
That's part of AOTA, so our national organization, the American Occupational Therapy Association. It's part of Vision 2030
Mhm.
is being universally recognized and
Okay.
having more of that recognition of what we do. And I was just actually talking to a fieldwork educator
Mhm.
yesterday about this and how there's still people who don't know exactly what OT is or haven't heard of it. I and so I think that that is a goal. If you ever run into someone who's had an occupational therapist in their life or in a family member or a friend's life, like they've got it right, and they're so excited to share about it. I think we just need to be better at promoting ourselves and what we do and getting it out there. And I think one of the difficulties is because we can do so many different things in our profession that I think people then find it hard to kind of just put us in like this is what we are, right? And make it like
people like a box.
Right. And we literally can do so many different things. And so I think that's where the challenge is like, how do we kind of package this for easy kind of recognizability to be able to share and get that out there? I think there's one initiative, it's called Why Choose OT, that's doing a great job of promoting OT and getting what we do out there. And especially looking at, for that initiative, it's really focused on students and getting them to see what OT is as a future career. Yeah, it's great. You should go online. Lots of great videos and resources there.
So 2030, or the Vision 2030 through OATA, greater recognition. Are there any others that you think are going to kind of maybe change the way we see occupational therapy?
I think it's more the goals of what they want OT to be in serving, the individuals or the groups and populations that we work with. So making sure that it's cost effective, right? Evidence based is huge in terms of just kind of solidifying OT as a profession and what we do. And so those are big key aspects of the vision, along with, I think as we look at the profession, continuing to grow as the world changes, right? So the use of technology, virtual reality, AI, how all of those things are going to start fitting in to help us grow as a profession.
Do you currently or know any occupational therapists who currently use like VR or anything like that in their therapy?
So I think it's interesting that you bring that up. I haven't worked specifically with a therapist who's used it in therapy sessions, and I think there's some barriers there, right, in terms of cost and the evidence that we have to this point. And so I'm currently on a feasibility study looking at virtual reality and its use, and so looking at can this be utilized in the clinic to help support children with disabilities. And so I think that's up and coming. It's definitely something that we have the technology for. So how can we best utilize that to support individuals in engaging in occupations
and keep it accessible?
Right, exactly.
I think that's something that, especially on social media, sometimes it's hard to look at something and realize that this is not accessible to everybody.
Right.
Especially things like TikTok. You see, which I'm not here to diss TikTok.
No, yeah, of course.
But you see these videos or things, and it's, oh my gosh, this person's using it. I'll just, because we've probably all seen this, but like the golf simulators, you see those and they look amazing. You don't realize, square footage wise, how much that's taking up, how much that costs, in the fact that anytime there's a problem with it, you can't fix it yourself. You've got to call out to a company that comes in and fixes it. So not every clinic could even have the space to have it. And then to utilize something like that, you're probably either charging insurance more, or it's something that's at a premium, a higher premium, and not every patient's going to be able to afford that. And that's private practice, private insurance, not even thinking about looking at our public schools or just any school-based program or underserved populations.
And I think too, thinking about like what's the transferability of what is being done in that environment to then the actual occupation that they're engaged in, and how that transfers over to is a consideration as well. And then, obviously any individual factors that might make that a little bit more challenging. We have to consider all of those pieces to see if that is really the best approach for that individual.
Right. Because especially in occupational therapy, you are looking at the full
Right.
individuals, which is so lovely.
It is.
So,
It's, we, I always think of the theory with Bronfenbrenner's ecological
yes,
systems theory, right?
you taught
Because
me about this, and I
I
love it so
it's
much.
so great and I love it. But when we think about the individual, we have to think about all those other pieces that surround that person, right?
Right,
And so we have to think about them. We have to think about their home, and who's involved in that person's life, right?
right,
Where do they go to school or where do they go to work? And then we have to continue out bigger and bigger to look at, well, what are the policies that are impacting that
right.
individual? Um, there's just so much to consider
Yes.
within that. But that's why I love it because everyone's story is different. Everyone's life situation is different.
Hmm.
That allows me to be creative. That allows me to be really flexible and come up with solutions to problems that I've never solved before.
Right.
Right. So then you get this lifelong learning. You never stop in this profession. And to me, I love that piece of it. How can I be challenged in supporting this individual solving these problems that I've not faced before
Hmm.
and really make a difference in someone's life?
Is there anywhere within occupational therapy, the way it's going right now, that you are really excited about? I mean, is there anything that is it's kind of maybe more people are recognizing it, or anything along those lines? Is there anything that's just like you're glad that this change is happening, or you're excited to see it?
So I am. So OU just transitioned to the occupational therapy doctoral program.
Okay.
So we have master's and doctoral level programs.
Mhm.
Great. Both are great. What I've been really encouraged with the doctoral programs is our students complete a capstone project. And so that's an opportunity where we are embedding OT into so many different things. And I think I'm getting chills. This is where the profession takes off is through these opportunities. So for instance, we've had students partner with the Thunder and working on research with the
Mhm.
Thunder and their athletes, which is just such a cool opportunity. But then looking at other community partners with like the Little Lighthouse in
Mhm.
Tulsa, building out programming there. I'm thinking about students who partnered at the University of Tulsa, doing interprofessional collaboration with the concussion clinic and
Yes.
looking at driving simulation and
Mhm.
how to bring that as a possibility to the concussion clinic and to our community. um, and then I think about some upcoming ones that we have, including partnering with the Tulsa Botanical Garden,
Okay.
just for accessibility,
Yeah.
and looking at like OT can really contribute in so many different areas. We can contribute to research. We can partner with nonprofit organizations looking at things like accessibility, working with different populations within our communities and how we can support them. I had one student with child guidance with the state and looking at how to add OT services to child guidance and provide that. I mean, just amazing opportunities. And I think that's how we continue to push it forward, what OT is and how we can support people living life.
Yeah.
Right. And to me, that excites me. That's what really makes me like proud of our students, my future colleagues, and where the profession continue to grow.
Mhm. I'm excited to see it grow. I
Yeah.
really am. I mean, in general, I'm excited that most professions out there, especially the ones that are for a while have been a little more under the radar,
Mhm.
or they're having their time. They're on the radar.
Right.
They're showing up.
Yes.
We're learning more about them, and occupational therapy is definitely one of those for me. I mean, I've got several family members who have been able to utilize occupational therapy services, and still do, to this day actually, and being able to see that benefit firsthand, and then obviously having conversations with you and some other occupational therapists, it's amazing to see where it's going, and just more people are understanding it and seeing
Yes.
it, and it's great.
Right. It
So,
is. It's a great profession. There's still lots of growth in terms of the workforce and the job market. And so it's one of those professions that I think as long as we can keep moving forward, getting people to know what we do, how we can be utilized in so many different ways to just support people, I think that's going to be the difference there.
It really is. Is there anything that you would like to talk about while you've got this platform here?
I know. I was trying to think about it. I feel like we did a really good job of covering just like the breadth of OT and what we can do. I think some things to consider too are some specialties that are that you can do with it OT. So some people will pursue like certified hand therapist, which is great. There's different certifications and additional, obviously, we're always taking like continuing education and trainings, but within pediatrics, related to school based services or sensory processing, feeding, behavior. The NICU, I had a certificate in infant massage. I have a student who is also training to be a doula. So then she'll be an OT and a doula and like working in maternal health, which I think is amazing. Pelvic health, driving rehabilitation specialists, looking at specializing in acute care, gerontology. Oh my goodness, home and community safety. There's just so many different places that you can kind of specialize and find that area. So if there's something that you're passionate about, like go do it. You can do it. OT can be there and you can really do that. So at AOTA this year, Inspire 2025, they brought in an OT, Coach Dar, and she talked about her journey and so she started like traditional hospital settings and now she works with professional athletes on looking at their roles and their routines and their mindset and fulfilling those things. And so like how cool is that, right? But her background when she was talking, she's like OT was like the perfect vehicle for me to get to this point. Just working with people, being able to analyze very well and support them and come up with solutions. So like it can take you anywhere.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love a career that can take you anywhere.
I do too. And really it's whatever you want to make it. Yeah. And to me that's beautiful. So pelvic health, you can pursue that. It's just there's so many different things. So if there's an area that you are passionate about, like you can do OT in that area and really help support individuals, groups, populations. Like the world is your oyster, I feel like. So
And I now have another question. When it comes to the world is your oyster, what about overseas? Is occupational therapy a license that transfers? Is it?
So you would have to go to that country and follow those kind of whatever their rules are for licensure there. But there is the World Federation of Occupational Therapy.
Okay.
So there is that organization that helps guide like international kind of views. And they hold a conference every year or every couple of years, not every year. And so like we can go there for guidance as well, but then each country will also have their specific, kind of like each of our states has, our practice kind of guidelines for that state. Each country would have that too.
Right. So. But it is a profession that does span across multiple countries and not just the US.
Right. Yes. It's all around the world, which is, so amazing. So I'm hoping I applied to present at the World Federation of OT conference in 2026. So hopefully I get accepted into that. But for me, it's obviously presenting is key to sharing knowledge, but also to be able to engage and learn from occupational therapists from across the world is just an opportunity of a lifetime.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the really beautiful things about the national and international associations, federations. Everyone has a different name for their group, but being able to share that information and disseminate knowledge and experiences from, we had a client who was in this, or a patient who was in this situation, and it took us a while, but we figured out that if we do this, it was able to, and then just being able to carry that over to someone else and say, hey, look, you just told me a story about how you had a patient in a similar situation and you're struggling. Learn from us.
Right.
Exactly. Or learn from us because what we did didn't work.
Right.
So we've already figured out that these won't work. So you don't need to waste your time or your client's time, your patient's time on that road. You need to go try a different one.
Exactly. Yeah. It's, I mean, to me, that's like the beauty of research too, right?
Yeah.
That we can access all of this information as a profession to guide our practice. And I think there's just something so beautiful about that. Like, here, let's all share this knowledge so that we can provide the best support interventions, treatment for our clients for their success.
Yes. And then it goes back to what you said earlier, though, about the research based and the evidence based practices being the best because again, you're learning and you're doing something that's proven to work.
Yes.
They've figured it out. They know what's going on here, or they've gotten it enough to the point that now you can pick it up and put it into place and add to that research, maybe.
Yes.
Do those things. And then it just leads to better care and better health outcomes.
Better health outcomes. Hopefully, we're making things more cost effective. Yes. All the things, right? Yes. So it's an exciting time.
It really is. So, well, I'm excited to see where it goes, and I'm excited to hear if you'll be speaking at the international conference.
Oh, I know. I'm really hoping it would be just a very wonderful opportunity. But if not, it is one of my goals to present internationally. So I'll just keep pursuing other opportunities and getting the word out there.
Right. That's one of those goals that you can have it, achieve it, and then have it again.
Exactly. Too. Exactly. So, I love that. So.
Okay. Well, then I will sign us off.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Well, I hope everyone has a happy and healthy day.